All right, everybody. Thank you so much for bearing with us while we're working on setting this up. Welcome to episode number 2 of the Attention Plan podcast with me, FG, and
me, Tim the Sorcerer, and my wonderful cough.
It actually worked. Heck yeah. Sorry.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Sorry, tech issues, but just backgrounds and things and programs grabbing microphones that are not supposed to grab microphones.
Oh, yes.
All sorts
OBS
of things.
being its usual wonderful self.
But we
How are you
made
today,
it.
FG? You doing good?
I'm doing quite well. Yes, thank you. How are you today?
Good. Recovering from an intense RimWorld session. Glad to be sitting back and talking for a while.
Yeah, hot damn. That was something else. That was definitely something else. That is for sure. Goodness gracious me. Yeah. My mic is more quiet. Yes, I can see that. But we are getting ready to do the thing. But why?
I hope you've all had good days, folks. Thanks for being here.
I literally don't know why my microphone is quiet. Oh, I know why. Because I think somebody put a property on it. All good though, folks.
Tut.
All folks, it's fine. I can just do this. Actually, it's a little. I know. And I'm pretty sure I know why. Because there we go. I need to change that on my end. Is that any better? Maybe, potentially. There we go.
There we go.
I hope that's better. Looks better. Thanks for bearing with us. Only episode 2. So, you know, working on things. But we are here to talk about a very important topic when it comes to ADHD today. That is impulsivity, and all sorts of impulsivity. It's not just necessarily saying yes to purchases and other things or other risky behaviors. So before we get started, I just want to put out our disclaimer. We have a disclaimer. First of all, we are not medical professionals. We just talk about our own experiences. Also, we will today probably touch upon some disordered behaviors, certain, things in terms of maybe eating, gambling, alcohol, substance abuse, and all that sort of stuff. If that is not for you, feel free to leave right now or mute the tab, or come back to the YouTube video on a day where mentally you might be doing a bit better. Just wanted to put that out there. But anyhow, besides that, you came up with this topic. Why in particular did you come up with this topic?
Yeah, sure. I think it is one of these sort of root things, I'd almost call them, with ADHD, where there are these sort of different behaviors we have, but they come from a similar place, and then over time we live with them and we come to make an idea of ourselves. We think that I'm a person who does this, I don't like that about myself, or I struggle with that behavior. And one of the complex things of ADHD is the sort of layers and wrapping up of all of these different stories that we build up around ourselves. And I think impulsivity is something that is very at the root of a lot of these different things we can think about ourselves over time in the course of our lives. When we have this condition, we might feel things like shame about doing certain things. When we're younger and we're a bit more unfiltered, we might be more impulsive socially. So we might have been burned by people not wanting to be friends with us or to know us when we're young with ADHD. And as adults, it can be frustrating to do things like purchase things when you're excited, or you want to have something to give your brain a little bit of a dopamine rush. So I think there's a lot of different threads that we can cover with it, and they can be talked about throughout a whole lifespan instead of just as adults.
Yeah, definitely. There are definitely very many situations like that I can just think of at the top of my head where my impulsivity took over and definitely to a degree make me do things where if I had more of a level head at that point in time, I would have possibly I would have made a different choice. And there's two things I think that's really important that we need to note when it comes to impulsivity. It's not just necessarily impulsivity. What also plays into it is being able to control your emotions, because there's also this emotional side to impulsivity. So we can't really leave out the RSD that comes up often with ADHD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which might then lead you to a stronger emotional impulsive reaction than you would have otherwise done. So there's like two sides. One is behaviors, and then the other one is also like unregulated emotions that can come through there. And I don't know if it is like with you, but for me, often as a child already, I had that point where I would either be okay, or then I would suddenly, there would be one thing and I would just fly like out of my seat and I would just like tip over, and it was like a tipping point. Like I would never get violent, but I would, you know, that's like when the emotions would like just take over, and I'd say things or maybe do things that weren't ideal, so to speak. And so I don't quite can recall like how old I was, but definitely it was definitely a thing that like popped up here and there, especially like during primary school, and then eventually obviously you get more of a handle on it. And it's also normal for kids to overreact, because they're just, you know, kids, they are not fully matured like emotionally and stuff like that. But there is definitely, like, as with so many things with ADHD, there is that point where you just do it more often and more extreme to a degree where it becomes a problem, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And sorry, no, you go ahead.
No, please finish your thought. I'll go after.
No, I was actually going to go and move on to a different topic.
Okay. I was just going to say that I think that the side that you mentioned about the rejection sensitivity is really big too. Because for me, when we talked about this first, where my mind immediately went to was things like financial stuff, purchases, and about food. And we've certainly both had our own journeys with weight loss and weight gain throughout our lives. But I think you make a really good point as well about the rejection sensitivity, because it's a really linked in part of that. So as a bit of a preface for people who might not be so familiar with what ADHD is, it is an issue of the ability to direct and control your attention. It's an issue about the ability to get started on things, and it's characterized, among other things, by a person who can be quite impulsive. They can maybe seem unfiltered, they can maybe act in ways that seems to be irrational to other people. And it relates to the production of dopamine in the brain, which facilitates like us being able to focus on things. You can't really choose what you get interested in with ADHD. You might hyper-focus on something randomly, and then you might have an important work task that you know you should be doing, but it's boring, so you just can't get yourself to do it. And in sort of like wriggling in your seat, trying to get your brain to work in a brute force way that just doesn't work, you can end up going to other things. It's like other things have a stronger magnet to pull you away because you are trying to find a way to stimulate your brain so that you can just get that ability to focus. You can get the dopamine. That's one side of it, and that's kind of like a nutshell kind of description of the condition. But a really interesting thing that is not yet sort of codified in, I don't know how to exactly describe it, like medical practices or in medical science, but is very, I would say, universally understood and experienced by people with ADHD, is this thing we have started to call rejection sensitive dysphoria. It is not formally recognized, but it is a really common experience of a feeling of massive sensitivity that people with the condition have. And I can relate to it hugely, especially growing up as a man. It always sort of had a gendered side for me, as I'm sure it does for women as well, where I felt more sensitive than my peers and my friends. And that is a thing characteristic of ADHD. And there's a few theories around that. For me, I think it's sort of growing up with these thousands of little interactions that told me that I was a bit different to other people, sort of scanning for that, being aware of it, but without going too deep into it. That impulsivity is one side of it, relating to the dopamine and the brain. And then also that rejection sensitivity, because I think what I'm sort of driving at in saying this early on in the show today is that you can sort of be bored, in which case you might end up eating food that you shouldn't have. You don't have the room for it in your diet for that day. But if you're having a really difficult argument with a partner, or you perceive some rejection from someone, let's say you reach out to a friend on Discord and they don't message you back, or something doesn't go right when you're talking to friends in a group on a night out, could be anything, and you perceive a feeling of rejection, that can be really hard to deal with for people with this condition, and that can make you act impulsively as well. And I think those, if you have anything else to add to that, FG, let me know, but I think those are two sort of main categories that I would put impulsivity in for this.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Like, one is to make definitely like impulsive decisions in the moment, and then the other one is also impulsively deciding to not stick with whatever things you told yourself you would stick with, and saying screw it, because your brain is so overstimulated or dopamine seeking, or angry, anxious, that at that moment nothing is more important than making the brain happy, so to speak, right? And obviously there's different ways that you can that then shows itself. That can be overeating, can be drinking, substance abuse, gambling, shopping addiction, risky sexual behavior even is a thing that where it can come up with people. And it's really hard, because the more you're stressed, the more likely you are to do those behaviors. But at the same time, that's exactly like where you need to work on not doing those behaviors. And it is so hard to break out of that cycle, because then in the aftermath, you have the guilt, which makes you anxious and sad again. And then you need to deal with those emotions. And it's like this wheel that just keeps on turning, and it just can never stop. And it brings all of that like that guilt as well with it. Like, why can't I just be like others? Why is it so easy for them, quote unquote, perceived easy? Obviously, everybody has their struggles, and you're not looking into anybody's head. And most of the time, we are the main star in our own movie. We think usually that we have it worse, usually in that regard, like main character. Like, it's a little bit of main character syndrome, as in, like, for your life, you are your own star and stuff like that. So you perceive that others may have it easier, because you only see them every once in a while, not all the time. And but like that can be good, that can also be very bad, in case, you know, that you go like, exactly, how do others have the energy to do all of that? How can they do all of this? How can they resist it? How can they just say no to that cookie that I shouldn't have today, and all that sort of stuff? And it is such complex got just cluster of like a mess, basically, to like unpack that and like notice when you're going to have those behaviors. And this is something that meds, they can help you a little bit with the impulsivity, but all of that mental work, like actually that goes into picking apart, why do I feel like this at this moment? What does it make me want to do? Why does it make me want to do it? What else can I do? That is all work that you need to do yourself, and that is heckin' hard. And I definitely still also struggle with that sometimes. Like that's ongoing work. I don't know how it is for you, but that for me, like I had this has nothing to do with chat. This was all like, nothing actually went wrong that day, but I just perceived it was a bad stream day. This was like a few months ago. And I was like, okay, I am getting super stressed and anxious about this. I need to do something. I need to go out. I need to go on a walk and do things. And I did it. And most of the time that is enough. But that day, nope. And I ate so much food. I couldn't. Like, I had pizza and sweets and chocolate and just like ate basically my entire weight in food. Yep. Did it help? No, it didn't. It did make me temporarily feel better, and then I beat myself up about it the entire weekend. But yeah, so it's like an ongoing problem. And as I said, we are going to get very personal today with this. So yeah, this is definitely takes a little bit of bravery to talk about, but I think it's very important that we talk about it. And I don't know how it is for you, how it is for you nowadays, and how your experience has been on meds. I haven't had a situation like this come up on meds for me personally, but that's because it's only been 3 weeks. And yeah, so not a lot of chance for stuff like this to happen. So yeah, I wonder, I was wondering how it's been for you on meds.
Yeah, it's funny because I know that you have had your diagnosis a couple of years back, right?
Yep.
And I have had it more recently. And again, the grass can always be greener, folks. FG is really impressive at doing a lot of the foundational stuff of self-care and exercise that is really hard to do with ADHD. She does a very good job of it. It's very impressive to hear about. I'm still working on some of those basic elements myself. Consistently exercising is massive for anyone. It's even more important for us. And it's more important when you are on this medication because it affects its function quite significantly. It's interesting because I have absolutely had all of these challenges throughout my life, and I still do. I think when you were giving that description, one of the things that came to mind is the fact that at its heart, I think another important part of ADHD is the fact that you are very easily dysregulated, which is a word you might have heard other people use, people in chat, if you've heard conversations around this, or your family members, children, the word dysregulated. It can mean that you're very easily thrown off course, or you're very easily emotionally triggered by things. I mentioned as a man growing up, I felt very aware of that because that's counter to the conventional masculinity. You know, men aren't meant to be sensitive. It's a very common thing in the condition, and it's almost a bit beyond just sensitivity, right? It is a sort of feeling of being triggered is sort of a good word, which does have its own context and use in other situations as well. But it's like being thrown off. I've had moments where I can be upset or set off by something, and it can make me see things in a different way. It can make me see a person in a different way. You can be very sure of something mentally, like this person did something to me, or my opinion about myself is really negative right now, and it's real. It's not just an opinion, it's fact. You know, the world is this. I did a bad thing. I'm not a good person. The dysregulation is kind of like a mood spike is a good word, phrase to use for it. And it's a really big part of the ups and downs of this condition. And it's not just that we can have that happen, it's the fact that it's very easy for it to happen. It happens frequently. So you have this sort of situation with ADHD where you get very confused at first because you don't really start to appreciate it until perhaps you've had the diagnosis or you've had some years living, that you don't start to really appreciate that the process of going through that mood spike, that dysregulation, is tiring in of itself. It takes energy to go up and to come back down and to stabilize again. It's not just a thing that happens, it drains you. And so you have this condition, you're like, man, I just want to shower every day and eat the right things. But I'm exhausted and I've not done anything. Like, how can I even be exhausted when I haven't even done any of the stuff that I said I would? When I haven't even done a ticket at work, or, I haven't gone to the gym, or, I haven't called my partner. All of these sort of like really small things that you're like, you should be able to do that. How can I be tired? But that dysregulation is a thing that easily happens, and it happens a lot, and it tires you when it does. So I have that. I've always had it. I've been obese twice in my life. In lockdown, I was pretty much an alcoholic. There's sort of like a difference between people saying functioning, not. I don't drink anymore, but I had a real problem with that, combined with binge eating, which is a really common sort of combination of things for people with ADHD to do. Drinking heavily, eating to soothe yourself in response to these things. And I think when we talk about that kind of impulsivity, the reason for saying that is that the start of accepting and understanding this, it really begins with forgiveness. And you have to sort of understand that you have these tendencies and that you have patterns. You have to say, okay, maybe I'm not going to be able to accomplish all of these things that I want to do because I'm still getting these mood spikes. I'm still getting dysregulated throughout the week. Maybe my idea of success is that I need to lower those sort of outside expectations and understand and pay attention more. So in my experience, there has been this very painful, prolonged and tiring process of just getting to the point where I can look at my habits without, being revolted by them, being like, man, this hurts too much. It's holding me back. I want to do these things in life, but I can't because this always happens. Getting to the point even of being able to say, okay, I accept that this goes on. That's the starting point. Is a lot of work. And then from there, you can start to say, why does it happen? What happened before I ate all the food that I meal prepped? When I said I was going to have that for 5 days, why did I have it in 3? What happened before that? Did I sleep? Was there a difficult interaction with my boss or a colleague or a friend? All of these sort of fact-finding and investigation sort of things have to go on before you get to a place where you can begin to understand your tendencies, because they happen a lot. And that's a thing that has been throughout the whole path of my life. It's sort of gotten a bit faster and better since I got the diagnosis and the medication, but it's been a long time going through all of that. And it can be very frustrating, I think you'll agree, because you just want to do sort of quite modest things, really. You want to take care of yourself, you want to accomplish a few things. They don't even have to be lofty goals, but getting to the point where you can see these things that set you off and dysregulate you, so that you can start to plan around them. There's a lot of work in there itself, and it takes a lot of time for me, and I'm sure it did for you as well.
Gosh, yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned like the pandemic, and I just had to think like during the pandemic, I mean I was already obese. I was morbidly obese even, right?
Yeah,
and I was genuinely thinking that I was doing all right. But like there is a reason I put on another 20 kilos during the pandemic. And I at the time, I was like, when people were asking me, how am I doing? I'm like, generally considering the state of the world, I'm doing great. But like in retrospect, I wasn't doing well at all. But I have had such a disconnect from like actually feeling and experiencing what I was actually feeling at the time that I didn't even realize. It's been actually so silly in a way how instrumental it's been for me to get like a, you know, like a sports watch that like monitors like stress reactions and all of that sort of stuff, because like it gives me these external data points that are so helpful. Because this is a thing that also a lot of people that a lot of people with ADHD just have. We have this disconnect from our body. Like there's a disconnect between our minds and our bodies. So external tools like this can be very, very, very helpful. And just makes me think that Russell Barkley, who's a PhD, like a doctor of neuroscience, behavioral psychologist, something like that. He actually just recently put out an episode about like using tools like smartwatches for people with ADHD. And I was like, I see myself in that so much. And that really has helped me identify those kind of situations that stress me out. But it's still so hard that sometimes there just comes something out of left field. And I know everybody has this, because, you know, everybody has things that appear. But like for me, it can be like the smallest things that then suddenly make my entire world go upside down. So my RSD is a bit different, I think, to yours, where it's just certain comments from people that are not even necessarily meant in a harsh criticizing manner can suddenly be this insane iceberg that just gets thrown into my path. I crash into it and everything crumbles.
Me too.
And like it's like somebody physically just punched me. Like it's like so wild, and I clam up and I just completely shut down. And it's so hard then to go on. And I was always the type of person who in that case would then not show this, like, because, you know, you don't want to be vulnerable outside of people, because, you know, you just get more. I had people then that take more advantage of that and like needle further and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. In my family and whatnot, not necessarily strangers. So it's like, that is so hard. But like, I have it more like that, which doesn't happen very often. So it's not like so much of a constant ongoing thing for me. It's just like, there are these things that even now, like there's one thing that I think about right now. It's like, it was 24 years ago. It was something that my host mom said to me in the US that wasn't even a big deal. It really wasn't. But for me, it's this monumental thing where I was just like, holy crap. And it was just so hard to like just deal with that at the time, because like I was like, okay, I messed up completely. It was like a minor thing, but we just make it such a big deal because we have a hard time distinguishing between what's a big deal and what's not and stuff like that. It's just yeah, luckily at that point, like, I'm kind of glad in those cases that my reaction is to shut down rather than go like full on angry mode, because that's how I was as a kid.
Yeah.
Where if I would get teased, there would be like a tipping point at primary school where I then would go punch people. Not often, but you know, like, because usually it was like 5 boys and then me, so they would still beat me up. But you know, it's just it's RSD can be so hard to deal with, because it's so like the reaction severity is so not appropriate to the actual situation. But obviously the feelings that you're going through are still legit, because it is what you're feeling, right? And like managing that can be so difficult. So, and especially in people like us, where we just didn't know that we had this condition, it is then so hard to find healthy coping mechanisms, because people that don't have ADHD, they don't experience these things, thus they can't teach you coping mechanisms that help you. So we just kind of muddle through and latch onto whatever we can to just kind of go through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Oh yeah, no problem.
It resonates massively with me. You know, I couldn't have put better words to it. Exactly the same. It's interesting through the platform of Twitch as streamers as well. You have the medium of engaging with your people through text, and all the time I can feel a message in a certain tone and perceive it in a way that just sets me off, sets off that sensitivity. And I think the shutdown reaction is something I absolutely did as well myself. It is protective, but then debilitating. There is no rhyme or reason to it. You have this sort of a little bird's eye view that says, while it's going on, like, this is out of hand. This isn't what that is. It can't be that level of thing. How can I be having this kind of response? And you end up in this very difficult play, because on the one hand, you have that sort of mental awareness that it's an overreaction. But then a thing that's been very important for me as I work to accept all of this is you do have the need to have some kind of trust in your intuition and in your body and how it registers and responds to things. Because as much as it is perhaps true that we can overreact with ADHD because of this impulsivity, it is equally not ideal in my mind to live a life where you are completely cut away from any amount of trust or connection to your body, as you were just saying earlier, to your gut, to that flash you get in the stomach and the solar plexus, the chest, maybe your neck tightens up. All of these things are kind of signals, right? They're warning signals that something isn't right. And it can be so hard gaining any amount of trust with that sort of system when you know you have all of these stories about things being seemingly like setting you off. Like you said there, you were glad about the shutdown response. I completely get it, and I'd say I was the same as well. It can be so hard sort of reaching a point where you have some acceptance that your intuition might be saying something, your gut might be saying something, or that you see something, and then being able to say, well, okay, maybe there's something there. I trust that my body is responding in that way and telling me something, but perhaps that's as much as I trust. Perhaps I just trust that it's seeing something, that something's going on here, but I don't have to then go to my mind to try and solve it. And I think that we can get into so much trouble with this condition when we have something that dysregulates us, and then you know, almost physiologically go into this sort of spun up state. It's like your fight or flight kicks in and you think a bit differently. You can become so sure that up is down and left is right. And it can be very scary when you come down from that dysregulation and you give it a few hours or a day and you look back at it and you're like, that looks completely different. Holy crap. That's a really scary thing to go through. I found it very scary because it sort of affected my trust in everything that I perceived, you know. Fundamentally, I was like, can I really trust myself on what I think about people? But yeah, finding that balance between being able to accept that you have these reactions, but not turning to trying to solve them so much, for me has been a really big and good part of learning to manage myself with this condition. But it's a really hard balancing act to sort of go through, and it feels sometimes like a tightrope in the middle, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's so much extra energy that you just need to like invest into something that might come more naturally to neurotypical people, because they are not prone to these extremes that we go to. And yeah, it's just so mentally and then also physically exhausting, like, because it's like basically what happens is your flight or fight response kicks in, or the fight and fight, or just cower and stay and be like the smallest thing that you can be. Like, that's what happens at that point. So it's like your entire body just goes into like overdrive, and you kind of just go. And it's what's for me is really, really, really difficult to deal with my ongoing feelings and impulsivity is that if I get to a place where I'm not aware of my own emotions, which sounds so strange, like how can you not be aware of what you are feeling? But we become so good at like not digging into what we're feeling, kind of closing ourselves off, masking even for ourselves that is the point. Like I can think I'm fine, I'm actually not. And that's usually when my personal impulse control is like at the lowest.
Yeah.
And I don't even realize it. Like that this entire mechanism is like rolling and going and doing its thing. With these emotional spikes, it's a little bit easier to recognize that, of course, because you have this like big emotion that happens at that point. Like I had that, this was before meds, this was about, I don't know, 6-7 weeks ago, and I was like realizing I was getting to that point where I was like super overstimulated. I'm like, okay, you're reacting to this right now because this is happening, and this is happening. None of this is actually a big deal, but it's stressing you out right now. So just step away for a moment. Go away from it. And then that was the first time where I actually like realized that I had RSD going on at that point in time. And like just being able to realize what was going on made dealing with it so much easier. And like knowing, for me personally, it's like really knowing like the like, because of the logic behind it, helped me pick it apart and thus like deal with it, get over it really quickly, and then everything was fine. It was just like, okay, no, this is currently happening, this is happening, and this is happening. You're trying to do this thing right now while all of this is happening. That's why you're feeling overwhelmed. So just take a break, wait for that one thing to be done, and then go do the rest. And then that was fine. But like, it is not easy to get to that point. And there are still, I bet, situations that are going to come up eventually where I won't have such an easy time of picking it apart like that. But that made me really, it kind of made me proud, because I didn't realize, like I would have not realized this before, I think, like that this was kind of going on. And um, it made me like, obviously I knew that the person on the other side wasn't doing this to hurt me. They were trying to actually help. And like, that made the entire thing like just kind of more of a blip than the giant, insurmountable like Mount Everest that it normally tends to be. But that was like literally the first time where that all like came together like that, and that was huge, because like finally understanding why you react and in a way and what triggers it is so helpful, because then you can deal with it much better. So but yeah, that I'm sure there will still be bits where that'll come up and I'll struggle, but that was a really nice feeling. It was like a nice little win. And I do think that being on meds makes me also a little bit more aware and considerate of other people. And it also connects me more with what's going on with me, which will also, I think, very much help to flatten those giant, insurmountable Mount Everest that I just talked about. But obviously I haven't experienced it yet, so I can only speculate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult because we end up at this kind of situation which people with this condition and many people without it can relate to. As a side sort of tangent, we'll be talking in this show about emotions that everyone has, and for anyone who's listening in who doesn't have this condition, you'll be able to relate to these things, I'm sure. Some of you more, some of you less. It's not a case of people only having this condition, having these experiences. It's a case of them being turned up to 11 and then being more frequent and more intense in many cases. But if you have other underlying conditions, you have other complications, maybe there are things that you've been diagnosed with, other things like PTSD and complex version have very strong emotional spike aspects to them. You can probably relate to a lot of this as well. But yeah, it's difficult because we end up in this situation where we kind of get this chicken and egg scenario, right? Where we, in order to create some idea of a foundation, we need to end up in a place where we can understand all of our different triggers and tendencies, and then have enough function to be able to plan our life around those things. And that's really hard, folks.
Oh gosh,
really
yeah, it is so hard.
Yeah, you end up in this chicken and egg sort of situation where time is passing, and sadly, opportunities and experiences pass you by as well with them. That's one of the more difficult, I think, parts of this condition that I think is very important to give a bit of time to, is the fact that you miss out on things. You know, there's this process of accepting and grieving and being angry about the things that you didn't have or achieve or experience because of it. But this sort of chicken and egg thing where you get all of these triggers and then you try to plan around them, it's like a spiral, or not a spiral, a loop of behavior that is towards a good end, but it's very difficult as you go through. It's very draining and it takes time, and it can be frustrating to say, okay, I just want to try and even figure this out better now, because I understand that I get dysregulated. I understand I get the perceived rejection. Maybe I've got an idea of the kind of places where it happens, but then when it does, it still knocks me out for a whole day. I'm tired afterwards. I comfort myself, be that through any addictive thing that you end up sort of tying to, food, alcohol, substances, sex, all sorts of things. It can be a wide variety of things, financial purchases, to recover from that experience. And you can sort of be in this place where you're frustrated, saying like, if I just had a little bit more energy at this point, I'd be able to sort of kickstart the engine. Like I could jumpstart this thing. And then if I had a bit more energy in understanding stuff, I'd be able to have a bit more energy in planning stuff. And then if I had a bit more energy in planning stuff, I'd be able to avoid the things that I now understand. And you can almost end up in this kind of position where you have some pretty good theoretical understanding of all of these different parts of the loop. And yet that sort of moment where you spin the plates at the right time across all of them and you sustain some kind of result, it can feel like it just doesn't happen. And I'm sure that's something that you can relate to in your own life in ways we might not have talked about yet. It's like a feeling of not being able to jumpstart this thing, even though you understand it more and more, right?
Oh yeah, of course. And even like once you understand all of the mechanics behind it, like it can still derail you. As I said about that one day, like several months ago, like it completely derailed me. And I went down a behavior path that before that I hadn't gone down in almost, but well, actually years at that point. And I actually found that that then made it much easier to fall back into that behavior as well for the next few months, this was actually one of the catalysts where I then was like, well, you know what, maybe I should give this method thing a shot, like just to help.
Yeah.
Because they will help, they do help with that. It does indeed, like it doesn't deaden it, but it does mellow out a lot of those things, and like it puts a break on things, so you're not so prone to overreacting, and it does help with the impulsivity a bit as well, to a degree, or it's supposed to, at least certain medications, where it does buy you that extra moment where you can think about what you were just about to do, and then maybe get that energy to not say yes to it. Or, you know, rather than eating the entire bar of chocolate, you just eat a piece and then it's good. And just things like that. So it can be a really helpful tool while you're also trying to do that mental work. Like, medication is very new for both of us. So we keep talking about it because we keep discovering these things about with what it's helping in weird ways, and it's just like this fascinating new things, because it's making certain things a lot easier. It's making certain things also a bit harder, I think, and like it makes you re-examine your behaviors yet again. And but there is so much mental work that you need to do, especially when late diagnosed, that you need to pick apart your behaviors and your reactions. It takes a lot of work, and which why like behavioral therapy and like ADHD coaching can be such an incredible, valuable tool, just to help with that process. Like, you don't even need to be medicated for that. You can just do it and it can help you, and it just teaches you more strategies, right? There's obvious strategies that are easy to understand, like, you know, store stuff in clear containers, not behind locked doors, because then you won't forget that you have them and things like that. But there's so much on that emotional side that isn't even reflected in the entire ADHD like name, right? So it takes that takes so much work and so much emotional work as well. And even if you don't want to talk with anybody, I'm a big fan of journaling in that regard, and like writing things down and expressing things there. And that's definitely over the like last almost 2.5 years. Well, it's actually been almost 2.5 years since I got diagnosed. It helps so much. And yeah, it's all just a tool in our toolbox. And we should make use of as many as we can to help us live the best life that we can with this condition, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested. I have a question for you about the journaling, but before getting to that, I think the word toolkit is really important, because one of the things, you know, again, many people in life, but people who are neurodivergent can understand, is the feeling of a box that you never quite fit in, and a series of ways of doing things that never work for you, and a process of giving yourself permission to not follow another person's process or their book. And one of the silver linings or benefits of where we are now is that we have a wider toolkit, right? And that we can choose things that work for us. And I think the thing that I want to just slot in there before I ask you something is the thought that it is important to develop a context and a history and a trust in what works for you. And that's going to be different for everyone. It's going to be very different between you and a neurotypical person. That'll be a really big difference. But it can also be different between people who have the same condition or different backgrounds. And for me, things like journaling, I've tried in the past, but they can become very difficult for me, similar to meditation, even though it's a big thing in my life. It's related to important things in my life. I struggle with those a lot because I go right away, before I've even started, to the expectation and fear of keeping that habit up and doing it consistently. And then that very thing which was meant to help me becomes an axe hanging over my head, which in of itself paralyzes and dysregulates me. And so I don't typically do things like that. And so I'm interested to hear how that's worked for you and how you relate to that. And before that, as I just said, for anyone listening in, it's really good to follow your interest, your curiosity, and a history of whatever works for you to figure out what your own things are, because you're building your own unique kit to get you through life as ably as you can. But for you, FG, when you do things like journaling, how do you relate to that feeling of the overwhelm and fear of maintaining a habit like that?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect question. I actually super ties into a video I watched yesterday where this is another ADHD thing that we do, where we, as you said, once like that habit, we get discouraged to do things because we can't do these things perfectly. And perfectly also means keeping up the habit, making it look nice, making look great for social media, like telling everybody about it, all that sort of stuff. And that keeps us away from doing these things. And that perfect is like the enemy of actually being able to do anything and do anything well, because you don't need to be perfect. The last 10-20% take the most work. So if you just do it a little bit, that's already a great step and it helps. So funnily enough, with the journaling, for me, after my diagnosis and throughout my weight loss, I did do it daily, and it really helped, because it was that one moment in the day where I would have a nice beverage, I'd sit down, write it, and because I was writing, my thoughts would slow down. And that was like the only time really, or one of the very few times only in a day, where my thoughts would slow down, and it was almost be like a catharsis where you just get a little bit of a break. And I did that for all of 2023 and all of 2024. and it was incredibly helpful. This year, I thought I would do a different setup. It didn't work for me, and that's fine. It's fine. You can try a new thing. It doesn't work. That's okay. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. So I went back to my previous setup, but now I found actually that with meds, I don't actually need that sit down and think about my feelings and my thoughts, because they're not a jumbled mess in my brain. So journaling was this huge important tool in my toolkit. That's now kind of taken a step back, because it turns out I don't need it as much anymore. Like, I still journal when I feel the need to, like when I want to, like there's lots going on and I want to talk about it. But I don't make it a habit in that I say I have to do it every single day. Because tools can come and go as well, which I think this illustrates really nicely. For those 2 years, it was an incredible helpful tool to process things and think about what happened that day, write down my frustrations, my feelings, and it helped me work through a lot of that. Now, because the inside is no longer such a jumbled mess for me, with thoughts racing every which way, it's not such a valuable tool anymore. And I spent my time doing other things, and that is okay. That's what I'm trying to say here. It's okay to do a tool for a little bit, and then when it's no longer helpful, you do away with it. And if it's something that doesn't work for you and you've tried it, that's also okay. I know there's a lot of people that you swear on it. There's a lot of people with ADHD that swear on meditation. For me, it drives me absolutely bonkers. I cannot do it. I hate it so much. Like, it's just, it's so rough. But if you're struggling with getting into journaling, especially if you've got ADHD, because you're going to do the thing where you're like, okay, I need to have the perfect notebook. I will need the perfect pen. I will need the perfect stickers. I need to make it perfect. I need to make it look good. And if I start writing and like I need to cross out a word, that's already ruined. It ruins it all. Right? And that is something you need to learn to kind of step over, and you need to embrace imperfection, because the imperfection is actually what makes it look good, but it's really hard to do it. Like, you need to learn that it's okay to cross out things and to scribble down things and all that sort of stuff. Like, I use a physical notebook for like writing down things and like for my to-do list and stuff like that. And it's totally okay, like to change things. Like, I changed things here, I crossed things out, I moved it over, but that's actually what's making it like work and look good, because this is a reflection of who I am. Because I'm not that perfect person that doesn't make a spelling mistake accidentally, or accidentally puts another loop on a letter and that sort of stuff. I'm not that person. Nobody is that person. We like to present ourselves on social media like that person, or certain influencers do, but we're not. So it's good to embrace imperfection and to be like, this is good enough. Like, this is good enough. I absolutely hate the way I wrote like to-do list of the week at the top here. I hate it. But it's good enough. It denotes what it is. It doesn't need to be perfect, and it doesn't need to be incredible, cursive handwriting to make it look amazing, because this works and it's me. But
Yeah.
that is also a lot of work. And if journaling doesn't work for you, that's okay. If you want like to try it out, you can even do it on loose papers, because it's literally just about getting the thoughts out of your brain and sort of structured and like picking them apart a little bit. And if you're struggling to get started, literally just Google beginner journaling like questions or prompts. And there are plenty of websites out there that have like a list of like, I don't know, 20, 30, 50 prompts. And you will find one that you want to write something about it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's a good start. And once usually, if you start, that's when you keep going. And if you start and you find this doesn't work for you, that's okay too. That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it makes me think of the thing that we're describing in my eyes. What comes to mind is that we're talking about a really extreme judgment on a thought or like a series of thoughts, right? We're like, this happens and it's bad. You know, I know exactly what you mean with the title of to-do list. Like maybe it's not like indented right, or you know, it's like I ran out of space and I can't put the date because it's a slightly longer date. You're like, oh god damn it, and now I got to start again. But that was the first page of the notebook. Oh my god, it's all gone wrong.
Oh god, get out of my head.
Yeah, I do model painting, and I'm good at it. I'm really good at it. And it leads me to the thought that I have here is that there is almost like a dark and a light side to what we're doing here, what we're talking about. We're saying, I have this belief about writing in the notebook, writing the title. You know, it's not good enough. It's messy and I didn't get it right, so it is wrong. Ergo, I'm wrong. Worthless, whatever. And it is tricky because it sort of skirts on the whole ADHD as a superpower thing, which gets misused a lot. As you know, we'll both say very readily, ADHD is not a superpower. It's in the UK, it's a disability, and it's difficult. But that sort of eye for quality, the drive to get things right, I think it does have a dark and a light side to it. And that can be a good thing, because we can, when we are not dysregulated, when we're not thrown off, we can be very sort of discerning, creative people who can create things to a very high level of quality. And certainly when I've been freed and lifted up out of my own cycles and my own sort of depressive feelings or self-critical feelings, I can do really cool things. And I think that's sort of like part of the play that goes on for us, is this harsh judgment that smothers us, but then also this ability to be incredibly creative and to do things to a really high standard. And the point that I want to drive at after sort of establishing that is that can be in of itself really hard with ADHD, because you can get celebrated for that high standard. And if that high standard is coming from a bad place, people can say that your best work was when you were feeling the worst about it, because you were worked up about doing it. You know, maybe I was painting a model and I did an amazing job, but I did it because I was beating up myself the whole time. And it was this mental spiral of self-criticism and difficulty, but I made something really nice, and then people can celebrate you for it. And I think it sort of feeds into this more emotional sort of judgment for who you are, someone who's imperfect, someone who doesn't get it right all the time. You can beat yourself up for that. Sometimes people can even see it when it's working well and celebrate you for it. Those are all sorts of different types of judgment from different angles. And I think that one of the ways to sort of get out of this loop, this circuit, this painful self-criticism is to start to try and detach a little bit from the judgment full stop, whether it's good or whether it's bad. But that's a really hard thing to do. And again, it reminds me of this passage of time, which is really hard to deal with. It's, you know, that these things take experience. They take experience of yourself. You don't get that for free. You know, as a kid, you're unfiltered. You don't have that yet. It takes time to build it up. And I don't really know where the ultimate point of this lies, but when you were saying that, I wanted to sort of speak on the good and the bad side of it, and how challenging it can be, and how it's ultimately all these different kinds of judgment, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think I don't know how it was for you, but I also really kind of feel that, especially like starting with my generation and then also younger generations, we were also always almost discouraged to pursue things that you weren't immediately really good at, because you needed to be good at it, because otherwise it's not worth pursuing it. And hey, if you're good at it, why not turn it into a side hustle, right? And then like just turn it into hustle culture and all that sort of stuff. Like I just have this thing where I remember like I went to like a sports thing and I really enjoyed it, and then I brought a friend. He was better at it than me, and then my mom just saying, well, now it's pointless that you're going because she's already better than you. Like, what the heck? You are so allowed to just do things because you enjoy them, and even if you suck at them, it is you're allowed to do them and enjoy them as a hobby, because you need things that you need to distress. But it's, once again, so much hard mental work to disconnect your need of like perfection from the need of enjoying something, and just doing something because it makes you happy. And it's like, I think with for me, what like one of my hyper focuses is like where my interest is, and this is where my creativity lies, because somebody in chat was talking about creativity. Creativity does not necessarily mean art. Creativity that you get can be with ADHD, because we tend to think a bit more freely sometimes, and like come up with new things. Creativity can be in handcrafts, it can be in cooking, it can be in writing, it can be, for me it's language learning. Like my brain just gives me this this way to like creatively grasp languages like inherently that others maybe don't. And like I find it easy to a degree to pick up like natural speaking patterns that others have to work really hard for. That's my creativity. Like that's what I am, like that's how it expresses itself for me. I'm a terrible artist and all that sort of stuff. Like I'm not creative like that. But with languages, that's how it expresses it for me. So basically, if you want to try out a hobby, it is once again that whole thing. We want to do it perfectly, and we want to do it like amazingly right from the start. Think about it for a while. Don't give it into your impulsivity, because we do like that impulsivity when we find something new that we really get into. We have to buy all the things and do it really well, and then you get all the things, and that's where the dopamine hits, and then you never actually start. I have some of those things as well, you know. That's totally a thing. But like, find a way to do it with spending the least amount of money, and first of all, see if you even enjoy the process. And that is hard. That is so hard, and it is hard to get out of that loop sometimes of like the buying stuff for the hobby and stuff like that. And you know what? Sometimes it's also okay to give in and buy something for your hobby if you were already enjoying it.
Yep.
And, you know, give yourself a little reward, because you can't be perfect all the time, because perfect is the enemy of good enough, and getting things done and living your life and spending time with the people that you love, and, you know, with friends, your pets, doing things that you like. So it is a balancing act. It is a balancing act for everybody, definitely. But it's a bit more of a balancing act for us, because that's kind of, as you said, what ADHD kind of boils down to. You deal with everything that everybody else is dealing with, but it's like turned up by 11.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's another conversation I had with a friend recently gave a really interesting little twist on this, which I didn't think about myself. And it's that we've sort of, in what we just talked about now, each of us, we describe this whole subject of finding creative stuff and impulsivity kind of in a, how do I want to say it? Not in a moral way, but we described our emotional kind of understanding about it, right? We're like, oh, it feels this way. This feels good. This feels difficult. I don't like this. I had a really good conversation with a friend who offered the idea as well that the dopamine seeking aspect of it is a really sort of big underlying driver for this behavior, that we can sometimes sort of not even see that it's there, and then we can try and make an explanation like, oh, well, you know, this feels good, or, you know, we can sort of use our brains, you know, to try and to figure it out. And we can almost not even realize that we've done it. And she just offered up this thought that I didn't think about, which was like talking about wanting to do things perfectly or do things in a bigger way. That what does that really mean? A big, perfect thing means a rush of reward. Go figure, right? We have these brains that are deficient in their ability to produce this dopamine. We have a deficit of it. We don't have as much. And so when we get a reward, we feel it more. We enjoy food more, drink more, all the things that we've talked about, because the baseline state for us is that we are starved of that by comparison to a neurotypical person. And when I talk about, you know, maybe going to the gym or painting a really good model, yes, it's like I feel like that pull, which I can kind of understand, of wanting to do it like big, wanting to throw myself into it, and hating the idea of just a small step. Like, God, just that does nothing. Like, why could I, you know, do that? And the interesting sort of reminder that there might be a very sort of brain chemical level thing going on there, where it might not be anything, perhaps even more than the fact that that big thing, that perfect thing, gives you the feeling of reward. It gives you that release in your brain that you can't normally get. So, you know, no crap. We want to do things big, and we want to do them perfect, because it influences, you know, like a release of chemicals in our brain when they do. And that's not all of it. I'm not reducing everything just to that. But for me, when I was reminded of that in the conversation, I was like, yeah, that rings true for me. You know, for me, have in the past more, less so now, been a chronic overthinker, and sort of turned to my brain as like the refuge and the thing that solves stuff. And it's confusing because you can get bloody good at doing that over time. So, you know, you can end up being pretty good at it. But that sort of, oh yeah, we have this brain which is deficient of this dopamine, of this sort of normal baseline. And yeah, maybe that small step doesn't feel as good, or maybe I sort of pull away from it or recoil from it a little bit. Doesn't have to have anything to do with the brain necessarily. It doesn't have to have anything to do with what I sort of mentally think about it. It might just be influenced really heavily by the fact that that small step doesn't get me out of this starved state that my brain is in.
Definitely. Or rather, counterpoint, you think it doesn't. Because
Yeah.
it does actually. That's the thing. But it is hard to see those small steps. And we tend to not want to celebrate the small steps. But the big thing at the end is made up of all of these small little steps. Like for me right now, I'm diving into learning Japanese properly. Finally clicked. It's working. Nice. I have a teacher. Awesome. And all that sort of stuff. And obviously the ultimate amazing goal would be to be fluent in Japanese. Like that would be amazing, right? But that's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not. Like as much as I want it to, it's not. It's gonna take hours of practice, and I still make silly mistakes. I sometimes read things wrong, especially when tired. I mean, I do that in English or in my native language as well, right? But I was so proud of myself that for like my last class, I was able to like actually write for the first time a longer free-form text. And like that small step is a small step compared to what I want to end up, where I want to end up at. But it actually did give me that happiness. It did make me feel actually proud of what I achieved. And that is something that we struggle with as well, like to actually feel proud of what we've done, because oftentimes it turns into such a slog that we just feel relief. But we need to celebrate those little wins that we get. So, and it felt so good to do that. I made stupid mistakes in that. No crap. Like I completely misspelled a word about 10 times throughout the entire text. But at the same time, it was a great learning experience, because now I will never forget how to spell that word. And it's just, it is once again that big mental work that you have to put in to almost learn to enjoy learning something new and allowing yourself to do it at your own pace and progressing slowly, which can be definitely really, really, really hard, especially if you struggle with other things besides ADHD, because ADHD is often accompanied by anxiety or depression, or if you if you're an autistic person, that adds a whole nother layer of complexity on top of all of that. If you're ADHD, like AUDHD, but both diagnosed, that adds so much more complexity on the top that I can't talk. That's not something that I am, so I can't speak about for those people like how it is, right?
Yeah.
But it boils almost back down to what we briefly talked about last episode, is actually that habit stacking. And you need to even for that mental work and for enjoying your hobbies, you kind of need to do that. And we've been so programmed by society that we always need to be productive. We also always need to improve. We always need to be better at something, that we kind of forget to also enjoy things that we're doing. At least that's how it is for me. And I just need to slowly discover the things that I enjoy doing that I might not be the best at. There are other things that I enjoy doing where I am very much still living that competitive spirit, right? Like with my running times and stuff like that, like I push myself to improve and stuff like that, but it is not just that, and it's not my entire personality, because I also do the things that I just enjoy and that I'm not good at. And it's something that kids are really good at, because kids just do stuff. They run around, they sing, they dance, they scribble on the pages, it's something that we kind of lose. And I think this applies to everybody, whether ND or NT, autistic, or with ADHD, neurotypical, with depression. We need to sometimes let ourselves actually just be human a little bit and do those things, and let go of this need to be 100% productive all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I get out of what you just said is the value for us of the first step. And in a lot of ADHD mental health videos, you'll hear that talked about using words like executive function, but also a really good word that has helped to give me some language that lets me be a bit more kind and understanding to myself is activation. And that is a massive difficulty for us. We can't activate on things. Like in the last episode, I was talking about how my kitchen was a mess. And it was a mess for days. Was it much work? No. I cleaned it in, guys, about 5-10 minutes. Like it was a bunch of dishes to do. But I was dealing with the mental weight of not doing it for days. And that can be understood in a sort of negative, frustrated context, which we go through a lot. But I think it also points us to the flip side, which is, can we use the impulsivity as a tool to unstick ourselves? Can we use it as a tool to activate? And I think we can. And I think one of the things that was picked up in and expressed in chat, as well as in what you just said, FG, is the tremendous feeling of, I just feel like a warmth, like an encouragement, and just a good, dancing around the kitchen mood when I unstick myself, when I activate on something, and the block goes away, and I'm just doing things, and it doesn't really matter what I'm doing. I just feel encouraged. I feel good about myself. I feel like, the clouds have lifted. I'm doing something now. And I think with impulsivity, if we hold a really narrow view of what the next step should be, it can stop us from taking something close enough that doesn't have any massive relevancy or perhaps even value in of itself. But it is massively important because it is the thing that gets the flow going. It's the thing that activates us. It's the thing that bypasses that horrible, stationary, frustrated state that we end up in. And I think that is a way I have learned to do it. And I think how other people can, if they have this condition, is they can learn to, in this case, sort of almost weaponize and use that impulsivity. So if I'm saying, hey, I want to do this creative thing, I want to make like a diorama for my model that I'm painting, I don't have to say, well, okay, the first step is I pick up this brush and this glue, and then get stuck because I can't do it because it's a giant project. I can maybe say, okay, cool, well, my painting stuff is in that room. That room and the desk is a little bit untidy. So how about I go and clean it up a little bit and put music on and change out the pot of water with the old paint water in it, and just do that. And then so many times before, I've suddenly felt that warmth and that just encouragement, that joy often, of the feeling of unstuckness melting away. And then it may end up being the case that the thing that I don't even end up doing is the project or the thing that I originally wanted to do, but then I go on a really happy bender of enjoyment with my craft stuff, or I do something similar that I'm really happy with and content with at the end of the day. And I did it because I gave myself the permission to not be so fixed on what I want the next step to be, and to give myself permission to do something close enough that I almost sort of like hoodwink my own stuckness. I can kind of sidestep it in a way, and then I get things flowing. And I think that could be a way that can be a bit sort of inaccurate, right? With ADHD, it might mean that you don't 100% direct your energy and your efforts where you originally wanted them to. Sometimes that's important, but it is a good way to get moving. And I think the consequence of not moving for us can just be measured in days, weeks, months, years. And that's that sort of act of saying, okay, well, if I can find something close enough, and then maybe when I'm flowing, I can direct my attention back to that thing when I'm encouraged, then I can use that trait of my impulsivity as a way to get moving where otherwise I couldn't.
Yeah, and like, well said, and I agree. It's a good way to utilize that. I've definitely also utilized it in a not so good way, like avoiding that one task to do and then just doing other tasks around it.
Yeah.
But more often than not, it does actually, it greases the gears, so to speak, right? And you start doing things, and suddenly you find, okay, I've done one thing, sorry. I'm going to do another thing and another thing. And I really find, like, the thing that I actually want to add to that is it really helps me if I'm sitting and there's tasks that I need to do, but I cannot pick what to do, and I don't know what to, like, just to get physically moving.
Yeah.
And then it sort of all slots together. So maybe instead of like ruminating on the things that you're doing, go for a quick 10-minute walk, you pop back in, you feel kind of this energy, and because you're already moving, you are more likely then also to like just transfer that energy into doing other things.
Yeah, new environment, getting out, doing things. I kind of had that this morning, really. It was a task that I had put on my task list to do. It was marked as important, and I kind of gave myself the permission to put it off during the subathon, but then that ended last Monday. It still took me a week to actually do the task and sit down and do it, but like this morning, for example, what I used to do it was, oh, I have like 90 minutes, I'm going to do the podcast thing, and then I'm already working, I might as well now do this task. As you said, I got moving, I got the gears unstuck, and I did the task. And then because I did that specific task, I was like, I might as well just do a bit more and do this and do that, and then just do this and here. Oh yeah, I can do this, and you know, do like these things that sometimes just turn into these. Doing one of them just kind of makes the flow start, and then you suddenly like get there, and I get the physical joy of crossing things off my to-do list. And I've done that today, and it feels heckin' good. And so that's why, even though like this is an ongoing to-do list, I have like some of these things on this to-do list, I've literally moved from the first week of this planner to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. But eventually I will get to them, and then crossing them off feels so good, and it spurs you on to doing more and more. And that can also be applied to actually physically doing things, like you said, for example, the whole cleaning up. Like before the podcast, I rated you, then I made dinner, and I was like, oh, I still have time, and I was already like in a sort of clean up dinner mode, and I was like, oh, I might as well just go upstairs, and there's 2 bags of laundry waiting to be folded, just folded those real quick. Like, that is not usually something that comes easy to me, to just fold the laundry real quick.
But once you get going, it's kind of like you're just doing it.
Yeah,
and sometimes that also does not work.
Yes.
Because we all have like days where we maybe didn't sleep well, we didn't eat right the day before or something, like it's just not sitting right, and it's just all kind of blah. And like whatever we can do, it's just not enough. And even meds can't like drag you out of that hole, because you know, hormones might be different and stuff like that. Like last week, there were a couple of days where I was like convinced that I would need to increase my dosage on my meds because they felt so different to any of the days before. But today, it's like the complete opposite. And I'm like, it's great, awesome, perfect. I took it, I did it. I can like, even though it's been 14 hours since I took them, I can still feel them doing their job. Right? And it's like, so it's like your day-to-day is just gonna change. And you're not always gonna be able to, like, even if you've got the perfect strategy and it's worked so many times, sometimes it's just not gonna work. And that's okay. But embracing that is also really hard.
There's the subject of avoidance is a really good addition to that. Absolutely spot on with it. The sort of difference between the unsticking that we both just talked about, a difference, a really important one and a hard one to pick apart, is where that emotionally is coming from. You know, I talked about, for instance, there's too much going on in the idea of a project, so I don't do it. Whereas if I go into the room and tidy up around it, then I unstick that way. That's sort of one way of it. The other way is that redirection being fueled by avoidance? You know, do I have a really important call I need to make? Or, you know, God, when I was freelancing and FG, you know yourself being full-time on Twitch, the tax stuff, you know, accountants or self-assessments and stuff like, God, I got to do that. The deadline's coming up. Oh, I just can't stand it. I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to, you know, maybe look at that carefully curated list of other things I don't want to do, but I don't want to do a little bit less. So, you know, maybe I'll wash the floors of the house, you know. And on any other day, I'd be like, absolutely goddamn-lutely not. I hate doing that. But I hate it a little bit less than doing that self-assessment. So there you go. And I think the sort of big difference there is one is driven by that avoidance, and another one might be driven by a sort of a different emotion and a different kind of energy. And when you've been in places with your life where you know you have a thing that you really don't want to do, and perhaps you've frozen on it or you've redirected in an avoidant kind of way, what has that felt like for you?
No, I definitely have that. Like, I was just saying when you were talking about like washing the floors, like literally my house, my apartment was never cleaner than when I had papers due at university. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Friends coming over, right?
Yeah, that too. But like literally, no, like when I had papers due, it was so hard because, like I say, when I had papers due, my professors didn't actually care when we handed them in. So you had to force yourself to do it. But like, it is something that it was just so hard to get started. So I would just look for any other task that I could do. And I would do things like clean the windows and other things that I absolutely hate doing as an avoidance strategy. But actually, probably about half the time, now that I reflect on it, it did eventually actually though lead me to then doing also the paper. Like not all the time, but it did sometimes lead to success, which is better than not doing it at all, right? So sometimes I guess you can also weaponize that actually and make it a tool in your toolbox as well.
Yeah, it's almost like we have a large amount of this energy, right? And sometimes it's a little bit tinged with a negative kind of feel. Maybe it's the avoidance and stuff, or maybe it's kind of a bit more positive. But it's kind of like this wind almost, right? That we need to try and direct and like put a harness on. And sometimes we manage to do it more. Sometimes we manage to do it less. And I think the control of that impulsivity, there are big milestones in your life. Like you might get on medication and you might have a diagnosis. You might have a partner that's really supporting for you when you were single before, so you were trying to uphold yourself without their help. All of these things can influence it, but it's also this gaining of perspective and experience of going through it to the point where you can start to direct it a bit, right? And it's like we know that we just talked about sort of like the air quotes good and bad. They're quite judgy words. I don't like using them, but they kind of demonstrate the point of that flow. Sometimes it's not really within our control when we're in one or the other. Sometimes it's just the fact that we've got this sort of thing that we can move with almost, and we can try and point it in a certain direction, but we kind of can end up in this place where once it's whipped up and once it's there, we got to deal with it, right? Yeah. And so I think for me, that comes back to acceptance, right? It's like I can't really control all the time where my motivation comes from, and I can't always control where my attention goes to and what those two things do together. But over time, I can get more experienced at using them, and over time, I have more of a chance of directing that sort of energy, even if it comes from a good place or a slightly non-negative place.
Yeah, exactly. You basically just develop sort of handling strategies on how to direct your the flow, and maybe just ultimately just be a bit more direct on the tasks that you need to do. It's not always going to work, but that's just going to be down to how you're feeling that day. And maybe, as I said, you didn't get enough sleep. Maybe you're on your period, if you get periods, and all that sort of stuff, because that can all affect it. Like even hay fever can make ADHD symptoms so much worse because of your entire body going haywire. So external factors like that aren't always apparent as well, that can affect you. So it is once again like that whole giant bucket of having to sort of navigate around and learning what you work with, but also letting go a bit of the guilt that comes associated with like, why can't I just do this and all that sort of stuff. But today is a day and tomorrow is another, so we just try again tomorrow, and then we try again. And it's never going to be easy peasy, but it can be a little bit more manageable in the end, with tools and things like that. And that can then if you don't have these extreme swings just in your day-to-day, that I think, just to bring it back to what we were talking about, can definitely help with the whole impulsivity, because you're not going to be as prone to making those decisions. And then it just gets you into like this sort of more stable of a state, which sometimes can be there for a while, and then there's a tipping point. But then you can, like, the more often you reestablish it, the easier it gets in the end, I find. And it's a lot comes from just being aware as well, and that makes a huge difference in the end with handling that.
I think it's also this feeling of, we know we have a life to live, and we want to do things in it, but there's so many ways in which we get told about a schedule that we should be keeping to. You know, if we're air quotes on track or successful or anything, schedule for relationships, for careers, for creative stuff, you know, have a house, have a car, all of these things for people with different conditions represent larger roadblocks that might be delayed or might not happen or happen, you know, later in life for different reasons that other people might not struggle with. And I think the thing that jumped out from what you just said for me was the mention of the word guilt, because we're talking about, you know, from the start of the episode, we covered these different contexts, these places within which we're impulsive. We talked about how the emotions can be around them. Sometimes they're this, sometimes they're that. We talked about the guilt and being stuck. And I think in addition to sort of talking about redirecting ourselves and getting started on things, another thing that gets better with time on this is the slow removal of guilt, the loosening of your grip on the sort of meaning of not being able to do something and the frustration. And I wish I could say that's a thing that happens overnight, but it's not. It would be very fake of me to say that it's an instant thing or that it's a binary thing, right? It doesn't have an on and off switch. It is like peeling an onion over and over again. Yep. It happens with time, and it does make a massive difference, because we end up with this sort of like attention issue where, like we just said, we can end up stuck, and then we have to find a way to activate. But on top of that, that guilt is like a blanket that just adds loads of weight, and then you just decrease the chance of getting things going. And yeah, that's a thing that happens over time. And I think knowing that that is a thing that takes time for us when it doesn't for other people is one of the more bitter pills to swallow. But it's really important to, in my experience, feel out that emotion, that sort of regret, and that sense of wishing things to improve faster. You know, I think we can understand when we feel like we're slowly getting better and we're kind of figuring things out, but it can just suck that it seems to be taking a long time. And I think that sense of your own schedule is an important thing to accept and to try and to sit with and cultivate, because practically it again just means that you have more of an opportunity to lift the load on an already challenging life.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like it's not just also regret, but also relief to have like the explanation, and you don't get a free pass, but it makes it loosens those tight ropes that you kind of wound around yourself. And it lessens the anxiety a little bit, and it is a lot of work, but you also have to remember, like, at least for me, like, I lived without the diagnosis for what, 38 years. Like, that's a lot of learned behavior that you need to undo. Yeah, especially because it includes your childhood, like, which is so formative. So we just do our own thing, and we are on our own journey, and we just work this way. And it's good that we're us with our own, you know, opinions and behaviors, and we just work a little bit differently, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well said.
Yeah, that was good. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. This is a really big one. I feel like we were both sensing that this was quite a personal and important thing to cover. I think we both did a really good job. And chat, thank you all very much for talking and listening in and sharing everything. As we said last time, we're focused on our conversation together. We can't be as interactive as we each would in our usual shows, so thank you for understanding that. And for everyone who listened in, thank you very much. You don't have to contribute through chat. or share if you don't want to. That's absolutely fine. But for people who did, thank you very much as well. You never know what kind of tipping point a person is. A tipping point can be a positive one. You might have shared something in chat that seems small to you, but made someone make a better decision in their life. So all of you have contributed to that. So well done.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. Thank you again for joining me, Tim. This was really good.
You too.
Thank you all so much for being here. And we will see you again in 2 weeks' time, because we are a fortnightly podcast. We are trying not to overwork ourselves and be not,
that's it.
We're trying to pace ourselves and all that sort of stuff. So we will now be switching to the ending scene. We're going to raid somebody, probably somebody who's doing gaming, that you probably all know. And we will see you on the podcast again in 2 weeks. You'll be live tomorrow? Are you streaming tomorrow, or is it Wednesday?
I will be on Wednesday next.
Perfect.
Yes.
I'll be back on tomorrow. So we will see you on our individual streams then. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to switch us over. Thank you for all the support and being here. And that's it. We'll see you next time. Take care.